uniform way across the province through our school boards.
Thank you, member, for the question. I'd like to direct that to the Minister of the Department of Education. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And the honourable member raises a good point, and clearly lifestyle choices and are things which make for healthy individuals. The publication, as the member has correctly said, was a publication of the people in the Office of Health Promotion, and our role as in the Department of Education was to provide a distribution mechanism. I will also tell the honourable member that when you bring something, a publication out like that, now let me say as well, that information on that particular subject was and is available in high school and junior high programs through other courses, and the honourable member well knows that. This particular publication was an interesting one, and I guess I can say that when I reviewed it first, and I did read it, along with the Ministers of Health and Health Promotion, and I guess it was read quite widely because I did read it here on the radio and see in the newspapers that others had read this draft version as well. But it was a draft version, the one that came in, and the honourable member knows that. And with most draft materials, very seldom does a draft come in where there are not adjustments made in it, whether you're writing a letter or whatever it is. And to be quite frank, in my opinion, one of the major things that has to be done with this type of material, it has to be in a form which will be used or acceptable. And be candid, I thought in the initial draft that I saw that there were some things in that were not acceptable, and I passed my suggestions on. What we were really trying to do was to help the group who were putting this together put it in a form where it would be acceptable. And there were some, you know, I could be specific in these things. I don't know, you know, there's 2 or 3 things that I vividly remember that were in that book that I just didn't think would fly with the population of Nova Scotia. And it wasn't necessarily the content. And that's what the unfortunate part of that debate was, is that people got wound up in the content of it as much as in the presentation, which was really where I felt, and I think my ministerial colleagues felt, that it could be improved. And indeed, through the efforts of the Minister of Health Promotion, the staff has gone back and revisited that thing, and we believe it is now in a form that will be be accepted much more readily in its present form than certainly the initial draft, which was the one that people got hold of and went from there, and without really knowing a whole lot about what, in some cases, about things related and uninformed, I guess, is probably the best way to describe that.
Thank you, Minister, and I'd like to recognize at this time the member from Halifax Needham.
Well, I'm not sure if the minister has really told us, though, about acceptable to whom. You know, what is the test for whether or not the information is good and useful information, okay? My concern, and I think the concern of a lot of people who followed the media coverage of school board meetings, and I have here a fair chunk of what was said at board meetings around the province, I think many people were very concerned about comments that were being made by members of the board. Now, I want to point out to the minister that the initiatives of your government with respect to health promotion in the area of tobacco control have been supported by your department with respect to policy around no smoking on school grounds. The initiatives around physical education or more activity is being supported by your department with respect to getting phys ed and physical activity back into the curriculum and access to the gym facilities and what have you. The initiative around better nutrition, a big feature of that is getting pop out of the vending machines in the school system and getting nutritional kinds of snacks and things into those vending machines. So I'm wondering, why is it that the healthy sexuality being treated differently? Why is it that if we needed to have information, and I have no difficulty with the Department of the Office of Health Promotion sharing a draft version and soliciting feedback and input, I think that's very important. But the minister says that, you know, the response is that there were things in it that weren't acceptable, and I wonder about that, acceptable to whom, with some of the things that were said. Why didn't the Department of Education take the draft and send it to perhaps the school advisory committees around the province and solicit input from parents rather than have it go to school boards? And do you not think that the decision around the distribution of this book could have been taken out of the hands of the school boards, that this would have been a justifiable occasion to take a decision away rather than end up with a very piecemeal approach, with some boards being prepared to distribute this information and others? Because frankly, you know, kids in this province need good information, and they're getting it in other ways. You know, they're getting it off the internet, they're getting it from God knows what, Britney Spears and 50 Cent and Snoop Dogg and all of this stuff that really, I think we really need to have good, high-quality information that helps young people make better choices and informed choices and deal with the realities under the conditions that they live today. You know, today is not the same conditions that I grew up in as a young person, or the minister, or others. And you notice I said it's not the same kind of time. I didn't say era. I look at some of the comments from the school boards, and I wonder what era are people inhabiting, or what era are they coming from, or what age. The Stone Age comes to mind. But, you know, I think this is a very serious issue. It's an issue about obtaining the objectives that have been set out by your government, and the absolute requirement that the Department of Education be a full participant and partner in achieving these objectives, because this is where young people congregate. This is where we get access to them. This is where they have access to other resources like guidance counselors and trusted teachers and members of the teen health centers that are often in our schools. So I'm not convinced that the department has shown enough leadership in terms of dealing with the school boards on this one. And I wonder if the minister has ever considered, given what occurred around the sex booklet, of doing an in-service for school board members on their responsibilities and the realities that these young people face in today's society.
Thank you for the question. Recognize the Minister of the Department of Education.
I would say to the honourable member that in-service on all subject areas takes place, if not every year, during the year, and I would think that if school board members were interested in sitting in on in-service sessions and I can say I have seen cases where they would certainly be welcome. Just want to draw the honourable member's attention to the role of the school board. This is a public health resource, and it was produced to try and help young people make safe, healthy decisions. And what we did was that we asked school boards if they would consider distributing the resource for public health. Now, I want to tell the honourable member as well, and she probably would understand this, that before a material can be distributed in the public school system, then it has to be put on the authorized list of materials. And that booklet, as far as I know, I will be putting it on the authorized list of materials, but it was not on. So we talked about it hadn't even gone through that thing. And all materials are screened. I mean, we just don't put anything on that list holus bolus. And on the list of authorized materials, there are certain prescribed texts, but that was not a prescribed text. That was a resource material. So it meant that it's resource for teachers and not intended really as a textbook for students. Now, I think it's, again, in any material, it's not just information that goes in there. You have to be concerned about values. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that I think it's stronger now. The book is more usable, and it's a better book now. For example, the initial draft of that, and you saw it, one of the things that it didn't mention in the terms of, the role of the parent or the guardian or anybody, if a child needed advice, it's the home. There should be at least one place that could be turned to. And for example, that was not, quite honest, I thought that was one of the things that should have been quite prominent, and it was not. And I believe it is in there now. Another thing which I thought a little bit difficult, the message is that as written initially, again changed, is that I can remember this list of things and basically saying, well, it's okay to have sex if one of the things was you can talk to your partner about it. Well, this book was going into grade 7, and I'm not sure that most grade 7s and things like this, or parents or people would think that was, probably a real good thing, without some other conditions. So we had some suggestions about things like that. It was the value that was out there in addition to the content. And I think it's a stronger book now because the group that was putting it together were open, received feedback, and made modifications. So I think that resource is a stronger resource and is going to be a more effective resource than it would be if that draft had not gone out and they had not gotten feedback.
Thank you. Recognize the member from Halifax, Needham.
Thanks. Well, I too hope it's a stronger resource as a result. I mean, I think that anytime you circulate a draft and you have an opportunity to reflect on it and hear what people's views are, then you have an opportunity for some improvements. And so I'm looking forward to see what those improvements actually will be. And I'm pleased to hear that the minister is prepared to make to authorize this text or this handbook as part of the resource materials that are available as the authorized list of materials. I think that's very important. So with that in mind, I want to ask the minister a question about the department's policy with respect to those who teach in the area of healthy sexuality in the school system. I know that there has been some concern expressed by a group of young people as recently as Friday at a session that the minister and myself and the health critic from the third party attended to speak with young people who have been doing some projects around the province in their various communities all over Nova Scotia around the needs of young people around healthy sexuality. And one of the things that they talked to us about was that sometimes in the school system, people who are teaching aren't necessarily trained, don't necessarily feel comfortable with the materials, might not have materials at their fingertips, and that the assignment of those who teach in this area quite often can be not the highest priority, maybe not as high as math or other specialty areas. So I think that if they had a chance to ask the minister a question, this would be one that they would put to you. They would want to know, what can the department do? First of all, are you aware of this problem? And secondly, if so, what can you do and what are you prepared to do to try to raise the caliber of instruction and interaction in our school systems with young people in the important area of healthy sexuality?
Thank you for the question. I'd like at this time to recognize the Minister of the Department of Education.
I haven't been made aware of that concern, Chairman, and I thank the honourable member for drawing to that. You know, there is the PDR course and other courses in junior high and high school where human sexuality is a subject for study. And I think, I guess I agree with the honourable member. There are probably people who would feel comfortable dealing with that subject, and there would be others who wouldn't feel as comfortable. I think you probably find quite often it may be some of the younger people who are dealing with that topic in schools, because you know, older people might not feel as comfortable. You know, if a group of teachers wishes to approach their school board or to approach the department with help in professional development, we'd certainly entertain that. I expect there has been in the past, Mr. Chair, but I just don't know the detail of it.
Yes, and thank you, Minister. At this time, I'd like to inform the NDP caucus the time and turn has elapsed. And at this time, I would like to recognize the member from Colchester North from the Progressive Conservative Caucus. Member, you have the floor.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, schools are very important. As you know, schools are very important in any MLA's riding. And I'd like to ask the Minister of Education, Mr. Chair, that the North River Elementary School is presently on the list for renovations. In fact, I believe the Department of Education has had it on its list for a while through the Schenectady Regional School Board, Schenectady Regional Central School Board. And my question to the Minister is, what renovations will be done to that school this year?
Thank you for the question. I direct that question, member, to the Minister of the Department of Education.
This year there is $250,000 allocated for roof and windows.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to recognize the member from Colchester North.
And I thank you very much for that, although I know the people in that area will be disappointed, as they were expecting a new gym this year. And under the Department of Education, you have a 9-year plan, which is now an 8-year plan. And I was wondering, Mr. Minister, what new schools do you have planned in Colchester North in the next 8 years?
Direct that question to the Minister of the Department of Education. Minister.
I think the major projects in Colchester North, the most recent new project was the Red Cliff Middle School, which opened a few years ago. There is a $2.85 million upgrade to North River Elementary School. I don't see, Mr. Chair, any new project listed for Colchester North, brand new construction.
Thank you, Minister. I recognize the member from Colchester North.
And yes, I know about Radcliffe Middle School. That was put in by the former government. Now, if I heard you correct, was that there's no new schools planned for Colchester North in the next 8 years?
The Minister, Department of Education.
The Chignecto Central School Board did not include any new schools in Colchester North on their capital priority list.
The member from Colchester North.
Thank you. And also, I was wondering about renovations in the next 8 years for my schools. I realize that North River Elementary School is presently on the list for renovations. I know I've been having meetings with them and with everybody for the last 4 years to understand that that was on the list with Chignecto, even as I met in these meetings. And so I was wondering, we're talking about new schools. So there are no new schools or renovations other than North River Elementary School in the next 8 years. Is that correct?
The Minister of the Department of Education.
Schools physically located in that constituency, the answer is no, but as the honourable member knows that, for example, some of the residents of his constituency, I believe, go to Salmon River, as do some residents of mine, and indeed some residents of my constituency cross to go to Redcliffe. But I'm just trying to think. You would have in that constituency, you have Redcliffe, you have Valley, you have the two schools in Tatamagouche, and you have North River. Is that another? Oh, no, you've got DeBert and all those areas. Yeah, right. I'm sorry. You can go over there. Colchester North. No, the list for Colchester North as submitted by the school board contains no new construction.
Thank you, Minister. The member from Colchester North.
Yeah, and I thank you for that, Mr. Minister. As you know, that some of my schools are very old, and in my riding, we just closed one, the oldest school in Nova Scotia, last year. It was built in 1878. My mother went to school in 1927 in Great Village. That's still being operated as a school. Tatamagouche High School was built in 1950. And I just want to ask the minister, what new schools are you getting in Truro Bible Hill in the next 8 years?
I'd like to recognize the Minister of the Department of Education.
There are two elementary schools on the books for that for the constituency of Truro Bible Hill, plus renovation in the Salmon River Elementary School is there too. Now there is some real discussion about in which constituency the Salmon River School actually lies, whether it's Colchester South or it's Truro Bible Hill, but I generally recognize it as lying in the geography of that constituency.
The member from Colchester North.
And I believe the Salmon River School, as the minister says, there's a discrepancy whether it belongs to Truro Bible Hill or Colchester Musquodoboit Valley. And Mr. Minister, what schools or renovations are going to be done in Colchester Musquodoboit Valley within the next 8 years?
Thank you. Member, recognize the Minister of the Department of Education.
Well, there was the new high school in Brookfield opened this fall, There is, you just give me 1 minute. No, that's not it. No. Stewiacke Elementary School, P to 6 is proposed to be occupied in September 2008. It will replace the 2 aging schools in the Stewiacke area, and site selection is currently underway. That's Muscat Aubert Rural High School is scheduled to be in September 2007. Now, have you got the rest of that Halifax list? I would believe, Mr. Chair, that's the list.
The member from Colchester North.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Minister. And I just want to bring to the minister's attention that high schools are very important to my area as well as the rest of the MLAs. And I'd like to bring to the minister's attention that Brookfield High School was just replaced. Muscat Aubert is on the block to be replaced, and Tatamagouche High School is not. And I just want to bring to the minister's attention, those schools are identical schools, and they were schools all built in 1950. And that concludes my question for the minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questioning, member. And now I would like to recognize the Liberal caucus. I would like to say that your time is 4:26. You'll have 1 hour in turn. And before I recognize you, madam, I would like to recognize the Minister of the Department of Education.
Could we just recess for a minute or so?
Certainly, Minister will recess, and we'll calculate your time when the Minister comes back from combing his hair. Thank you. Is it Bill? Thank you. At this time, I would like to call the committee back to order. And I would like at this time to recognize the member from Halifax Clayton Park, the time being 4:28, and your caucus is 1 hour in turn. And you're able to share your time, if you'd like, with a member of your caucus. You have the floor, member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask that I could share my time. I do intend to. So if that's allowed, then I'll make sure that that's on the record to start with. I have a number of questions. First of all, I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to ask some questions directly, and I feel this is a very good forum because it's somewhat less formal than we're accustomed to in a question period, and we have a chance to raise issues that are of great importance in our own communities. Just by way of a little background, I know you've talked a lot about rural schools, a lot about depopulation, and I'm sure that the minister knows very well a little bit about Clayton Park. At least we're a growth area, and an area that's seen 2 new schools built in the last little while. A new high school replacing Halifax West was built just in the last 2 years, or opened in the last 2 years. And prior to that, in the year 2000, we had a P3 school that opened in our area. And those were, you know, a lot of it, the capacity has grown, and the Halifax West was built larger than the old one in order to take in that extra growth. So we're a very different kind of neighborhood in terms of most of the ones that you're talking about in Nova Scotia, and our needs are different. And I think it's important for us then to just shift gears a little bit and look at what the needs might be in an urban area like Clayton Park. I wanted to ask you some of the questions about the school specifications when you're building a brand new school. And I just, you know, basing it on some of the things that I've seen in the Halifax West in particular, I'm wondering why the department doesn't allow for oversized gymnasiums and for auditoriums when they're building new high schools. So if I could just ask that, you know, why it's not in your standard specifications?
Thank you. We'll recognize the Honourable Minister of Education. Thank you. Go ahead, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are standards for elementary schools, there are standards for junior high schools, and there are standards for high school in this province, and the standards are uniform across the province. On the other hand, there is certainly opportunity for communities to participate should they wish enhancements, and there have been quite a number of examples of that in recent years. For example, the new high school in Colchester in Colchester South in Brookfield had a significant amount of community money in for enhancements. The 2 high schools that opened in Pictou County this year have, you know, community put a lot of money into that. In the town of Truro, where the new junior high is going, there was a lot of money has gone into that. Down in the valley, Kings West, one of the schools down there, there was money put in for enhancements by the community, and the type of enhancement may be different. For example, at the junior high school in Truro, they really wanted a larger gymnasium because you know, the athletic program is pretty important to that school, and some other places have redesigned the cafeteria and the music room to make sort of a cafetorium, they call it. You know, it depends really what the needs of the community are, depending what the existing facilities are in the community. And again, I come back to my home community of Truro with the new junior high school. They didn't need a big theater because there's one in the high school. Now, I expect in the new school that's being, the Halifax West School, I expect has a theater in it, does it? It does have a theater in it. Or at least space to put one in if there would be. And I expect that the new school that is going to come in downtown Halifax, whereas both QE and St. Pat's had rather significantly sized theaters that received a fair bit of community use, I expect that the board will probably ask the public to participate and do that type of thing. So the enhancements, you know, we put a lot of effort in trying to accommodate municipal enhancements. You know, we offer free design services and we participate in the overall tender, which gives you a better price. But what you would perhaps come into is you would find inconsistency across the province, and so what we do is we have design which is intended to maximize educational opportunity, and communities may have different needs, which the construction of a new school may provide the opportunity for community enhancements, and we certainly are open to that.
Thank you, Minister. I'll recognize the member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to continue on in that vein, in terms of Halifax West, the space for a theatre was provided by funding from City Council, because at the time when the plans were just being finalized, there was only a short window of opportunity if an auditorium was going to be part of that building. And the request came from their school steering committee that we act quickly, if possible, to respond to the need. So City Council did in fact contribute $300,000 to the building in order to get it into the shell of the building. And it still remains just the shell of an auditorium, because there's required apparently, over $1 million in fundraising to complete it. And so it's a, another burden really on a community. The gymnasium in that school was built to I believe the standard size for a high school. And when I spoke to members from the school board today at the Human Resource Committee, just asking them afterwards about the community use agreement with Halifax West, I was told that the gymnasium, being just a standard size, is always in use with the 1,400 students that attend that school. It is a large school, big population, and just to manage their own program of sports and extracurricular sports, it's busy all the time and unavailable to the community. So it's a bit of a lost opportunity that wasn't identified when the school was being built and expanded in some way, because the intent of the school steering team, which I was a member of, was that school be very much a community school. And as the minister may remember, it was a very unusual and unique situation in that school was built on city-owned property, which we did not charge for. If you were to have bought, I think it takes up about 17 acres. If you were to have tried to find 17 acres anywhere in Clayton Park West, it would have been exorbitantly expensive. And because of I think a good move afoot to cooperate between municipal and provincial needs, the city did come forward in a very unusual circumstance and offer to provide land to the province and let the school be sited on land that was part of the mainland common recreational properties. And it takes up a much larger chunk, I might add, than what was originally envisioned, although it's a school that we're all very happy to have in our community. But I think we originally talked about 7 acres and it's more like 17. But luckily the space was available and a good arrangement came into being. But the idea that adding these facilities such as an oversized gym or an auditorium to a community is an enhancement, I think is a little bit belied by the fact that every school that I know of that's been built in the last number of years has had those enhancements. Not as part of your core standards, but always because the community recognizes that if you don't get it when the school's being built, it will be a loss to the community, a lost opportunity, or they may have lost that facility when an old school's being retired. As you mentioned, the high school in your town has an auditorium, as do Queen Elizabeth and St. Pat's, and they will lose that because our new standards for schools don't require the need for an auditorium. So, my question would be that if we're looking across the province at all of the new schools and being part of the Halifax West School Steering Committee, we had looked at Horton High and we'd gone down to Digby, and both of them have provided auditoriums in them as well. So it seems to me that everywhere you go, you'll find that the community has stepped into that in order to fill the void. And it seems, again, like a sort of downloading, because we're left with lesser facilities than the ones that are retired. And so, I would ask, I guess the biggest question would be, how did we decide on what those standards are? Because they seem very minimum, given that every community has needs beyond that.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
I've not been in the Horton High School, Chairman, but I'm told it's a very good school, and in every way, facility-wise, and the education program. And I know that the Digby School, I remember my former colleague Gordon Balser, who was the MLA for Digby. He just used to rave about that facility, but that was a renovation as opposed to new construction. Having said that, the specs are set so that an educational program can be accommodated. Now, the specs obviously vary from school to school depending on population and the grades, the grade levels of the populations that are being served, because the particular courses have varying needs. So, but I guess you could say really the standards are standards which will, if this facility is built, then it will provide it will enable the provision of a good quality education program.
Thank you, Minister. I'll recognize the member for Halifax-Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just continuing on that theme, I'd seen a press release today at the Human Resource Committee that was relating to the 2 high schools on the peninsula here, saying that the community is looking at $6 million that they'll have to raise, and that they had asked for a feasibility study to be done, I think, through the school board to say we need $6 million to add what we're going to be losing from that. So I think that the numbers we're talking about are very significant, and the problem is really quite massive for the communities that are, yes, the beneficiaries of a new school, but they're losing community facilities at the same time. If your mandate is just to replace the educational facilities, then we've lost some of the heart of what a school really entails, because schools, as we've talked about, I'm sure over the last few days that you've been here, is about schools providing much more than just the basic curriculum. And so, I think that the point needs to be made, and I'm glad we've had a chance to exchange views on it, but I would like you to consider that our standards may be low, and perhaps if you were able to answer, I'd like to know whether our standard equipment, if you will, or standard facilities that we outlined for a new school, are they comparable to other provinces?
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
That's very difficult to answer. Clearly, I don't think they're comparable to the wealthy provinces. For example, schools in Alberta, they can build some really nice facilities out there because they've got more money. Our schools, considering the amount of money that we have to spend, is good, and I think the quality of our program is good, which is really the important thing to me. I guess, we could enhance the standards for school construction. There's no question about that. But when you have a limited amount of money, you have to make your choice. We could do all of those things that you would like to see done and have the government pay for them, but there are a lot of communities that would not get schools. You can either build really elaborate ones and fewer of them, or you can build more and ask people to participate.
Thank you, Minister. The member for Halifax-Clayton Park.
A point taken. We're talking about scant resources and spreading them further. I see that. What I'd like to ask you as well is a lesson learned in the construction of Halifax West, and that was that there was a close collaboration in the building and how it was built with a group called Citizens for a Safe Learning Environment, and they helped very much in designing some standards for healthier schools, because as you will recall, the old Halifax West was closed really because it became an unhealthy building, and it was known that for some time people were sick in that building. So it had to change, and the actual building of Halifax West we saw in the community as a model for a much healthier school, and maybe setting standards that would continue in other school buildings in the province. And I think really made some headway in terms of creating a model that could be used even across Canada and other places. What I'm wondering is what's been done since that time. I'm just aware of the collaboration at the time of Halifax West being built. Can you give me some idea how you've taken that as a very positive experience and taken it forward?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
If I remember, Chairman, I do believe that when I was in a different portfolio, I did meet with Karen Robinson, who I assume that's you were speaking about. She has provided advice to the section of our department which is responsible for school construction and renovation, and I'm told that her advice has been heeded. I'm told as well that she's also had some input into the Premier's office, so I can tell you that probably what she has done has probably had an influence on future school plans. I can tell you that some of the healthiest schools that I ever saw are the old ones that Bill Landrill might have been talking about, or the member from Colchester North may have been talking about, because you didn't really get into many problems until you started to make schools airtight and other public buildings airtight. When the wind was able to blow through the windows and all of those things, we didn't have that problem. And so the more advanced we get, I guess, in terms of being concerned about energy efficiency and everything, and closed circuit air systems and all of this, clearly it costs a lot of money to do that and have a closed circuit, a closed system.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Very much. I'm not sure that the old Halifax West was one of those high-tech, airtight schools. I think it was leaky and moldy, but from what I understood, it was built in 1959, so I think it predates some of the technology for R2000 and so on. However, it was, I think, built very poorly and very quickly. So, you know, we learn lessons over time that you have to have good construction in the first place. And in terms of the internal environment of these schools, I think because there's so many new materials that we're using in schools as well, that it's very important to look at the timing of when you seal your gymnasium floors or when you tar the roof and so on, to make sure that children are not in the school and that longer time is allowed before the school is going to be occupied. So those were some of the simple things, but I must say that that group had information on even the purchasing and where you would find products that were less toxic or noxious. And I would hope that, actually your answer indicated that there's been dialogue, but I would really hope that that would be formalized, that it would be worked into your formal structures for new buildings, for when new schools are coming on stream, because a lot of other communities might not have access to that kind of information or have an advocate of that standard, somebody as knowledgeable as Karen Robinson is, to actually bring the issue forward. And so it's very important, I think, for the department to be proactive and say, you know, this now becomes something that we will adopt. And of course, it's something that's going to be dynamic and always changing and updating, but I really think there's a need for that. And maybe you even need, you know, an expert within your department that would look at that, especially if you've had all these schools and school expansions on the go. So perhaps you could just respond to the need to make it more formal, that connection more formal within the department.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Could add that the individual whom I mentioned earlier is one of the resources that the department used, and we do have a person who was, I guess you would say, a specialist in air quality, who provides advice to the staff who are involved in construction.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
I'll have to take that to mean that you feel you're adequately resourced. Okay. I'd like to move on to a couple of other questions about school curriculum. And I think even when we talked about, perhaps I'll just go back a bit, when we talked about the components of a school, one of the things that becomes clear is that each of the departments can't operate just as a single silo, and education is sort of a catch-all for a lot of other issues that fall under it. We heard this morning at Human Resources some from the Halifax Regional School Board about things like the breakfast programs that schools are offering, but in fact they really are offered as a result of social service problems or community service needs that children arrive at the doorstep and have those needs in place. So that's just one tip of the iceberg, but because the students come in your doors into the classrooms, they have that first-hand contact with teachers, and problems are identified that are not just educational, but they may create impediments to the learning that you're looking at. So some of them are community service related, some are health related when we look at the special needs and the kids that don't get help perhaps before arriving at school, and when they get there suddenly they become a challenge for this school system to absorb and to help and help them learn. So I think it's pretty well accepted that you don't operate in just isolation as you know, just looking strictly at the educational curriculum. And that was pretty much what you said about building the buildings, that we look strictly at what we need to deliver our curriculum. And you know, I would just challenge that there might be room to work with the other departments to provide for some expanded facilities, because in fact, particularly with the phys ed facilities, you're looking at healthier communities. You've got an initiative to open the schools to young people, you know, if your bill comes forward soon, to make the schools available at little or no cost, just covering overhead. So those kind of initiatives mean that you're trying to expand the use of the facility so that we get other benefits, in that case health benefits for our young people. So I think that there is a good argument to be made that maybe as the Office of Health Promotion gets up and running and perhaps properly resourced, there may be other funds available there or in some other way that could help provide the facilities that are really needed. Because if a school is going to get expanded facilities, you really are relying on that community's capacity to absorb the extra cost. And some of them can do it and some don't, so, or don't do it to the same degree. So I just, you know, I question that we try and get away from the silo idea of each department just looking at their own specific demands and try and work together, and that would be something that I think you could advance within your own cabinet. So no question there, just a comment. On the educational side, I'd like to look at again, a brand new school. Libraries is an area that concerns me, and I wonder if you could tell me, when a new school opens, how much money is allocated to outfit a library?
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, that's a difficult question to give a precise answer to, because there is no specific money allocated for library books. There's a group of funds that are called F, T, and E, which is furniture, fixtures, technology, and equipment. And that would be a decision of the school and the school board how that money is going to be allocated. And in addition, of course, is that there are very few new standalone schools that just were all of a sudden created from nothing. They usually replace something. So usually when you move into a new school, you bring certain things from the old school. And so what I'm trying to say is that normally you're not exactly starting from scratch.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much. Certainly in the Clayton Park area, or in my neighboring area, Timberley, they have a new school as well, where the growth is phenomenal. We do have brand new schools, and they require money, especially I think for library books. What I saw in the elementary or primary to 9 school in our area was, again, the public had to do a lot of fundraising, or that school community, to get some books in there. They had a very small library, and I had a figure of about $10,000 in my mind for the money allocated to outfit that library. That would be in Park West School. But I wasn't sure if that was accurate, so I thought I'd throw it out there. But it's very important, not only that we have all of the technology, but that we have some books and some resources that way available. And again, it points to the need to strengthen our libraries and our commitment to the delivery of professional help in the libraries. And I'm wondering about the standards, if you could tell me some of the standards that are in place for libraries or library assistants across the province. If there are any guidelines for school boards that they must adhere to, or what kind of commitment we have to school libraries.
Thank you. Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Chair. We are doing a review of school library programs right now, but up to this point, it's been a decision of school boards how to they wish to allocate resources. You know, clearly, I think one of the points that I want to make, particularly at the elementary level, is there's been some talk by other members about school libraries, but the issue is that the heavy emphasis on literacy now, and if the honourable member would go into the elementary school libraries, or I'm sorry, into elementary school classrooms, the resources for literacy that are in the typical elementary school classroom today, if you were to look at that and the knowledge of the teachers in selection of materials and their knowledge, better knowledge of children's literature and than probably used to be, you can understand, I think, why many boards have made the decision to put more resources into classrooms rather than formalizing the position of a school librarian.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Are there any requirements then to have a library that's professionally staffed? I think virtually every school has a school library. So is there any requirement that there be somebody to staff that library?
Thank you. Minister of Education.
No, boards assign their resources, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Short answer. In Halifax Regional School Board, I know that there are some library specialists, whether they're library techs, I'm not sure exactly their designation or training, but I know that there are specialists within a category of employees that are dealing with our libraries, although they're not in every school library, I don't believe. I'm thinking that they are paid for probably under supplementary funding. Is that probably the case? Do you know if that is the case in Halifax?
Thank you, Member. The Minister of Education.
I know at one time Halifax was different than the other school districts in the province because in the days when there were, quote, teacher librarians in a good many schools, then at least the city of Halifax, before the amalgamated board, had they had one librarian for the system, and they had a lot of what they called library assistants in junior high schools and in high schools. They actually, in terms of that, they were behind the rest of the province. If you want to look at it, the other people had qualified teacher librarians, at least people who had a teaching license running the libraries, whereas Halifax, I don't know which, quite frank, which system was better. I'm not commenting on that. I expect right now that if there are these people in Halifax, I can't comment on how they, the board uses its resources, but I am advised that I think there may be some supplemental funding that is used to provide personnel for libraries.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you. Perhaps over the last couple of days you have talked some about the things that supplementary funding in Halifax and Dartmouth and our county area, what's covered under that. So you'll excuse me if I go back to that, because if it has been covered, I wasn't in the room at the time. But one of the things that concerns me, as you know, I was previously a city councillor for the Clayton Park area, and so I had sat through the very lengthy debates that we have there at our city council about whether or not to continue funding for supplementary funding. And because we have a mixture of former municipalities falling under different funding arrangements through supplementary funding, we therefore have an inequity across that one school board, which remains a real sore point for everybody, a real difficulty in dealing with. But what I felt, and this goes back to even the time when I was a parent, I still have a child in the Halifax Regional School system, but from the time they were little, what I felt was that our standards were far too low. The provincial standards you set are far too low, and that really, when I look at what some of the supplementary funding was paying for, it was really to provide a reasonable level of service. We talk about it as being enhancements, but really it just is providing a reasonable level of education. And I'll point to one area in particular which is a sore point, and that is the core French. And my understanding is that our standards are that we start core French in grade 4, and maybe you could let me know if that's right.
Thank you. Minister of Education.
That is correct.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
It's talk about whether there are studies that would show that is a very late time to start that, because we do offer in Halifax and some parts of the county now an early French immersion. I don't think we're offering parents a very good choice at that age, because you have a choice between your children not even beginning French till grade 4, or going whole hog and saying, I'm going to French immersion right now in primary so that my child actually gets a decent level of education in French. And as you know, even here in the House, we've had a discussion very recently about the capability of most of us to speak French properly and to understand what goes on in French here in the House, and whether or not we need translation services here. So it's important that I believe it's important for our young people to have an opportunity to learn French and to be able to take their place in the rest of Canada as well in terms of jobs. So waiting till grade 4, I don't believe has been shown to be a good age to start a new language. So I wonder if you could talk about that as a teacher.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
I do not profess, Mr. Chair, to be an expert in the learning nor teaching of languages. There has been a variety of models. There are people who would argue, as the Honourable Member has suggested, that a core French should begin upon entering schools, and I can tell you that there are classrooms in this province where that happens simply because the teacher has facility in French and is willing to do with it. Now, whether it continues grade by grade, I don't know. There are also people who would say that despite the fact that it would be very desirable, it would be much more practical to delay the core French until junior high. And there are others that, you know, we also have the enhanced core, which begins in junior high school programs now. There's a fair mixture across the school systems. You know, I guess, you know, if I would look at it, I suppose that if one started to speak a language, you know, they spoke 2 languages when they were in the home, probably most of them can do it. But the other thing that, you know, has been, there are a number of us in the House who have had some experience working in public schools, is that for some students who struggle in their mother tongue, to ask them to try and learn in another tongue, it does not make for a very pleasant learning experience for them. And there was considerable debate a number of years ago about whether French should be a mandatory subject at junior high or not, and I don't know whether it is or not. It is. It's mandatory, but I can remember some of the debate by a variety of people, you know, as desirable as it is, or similarly, if you were in a French language school, to require the English at the same thing. It would work both ways.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Well, I guess I'm definitely a big believer in starting early with a second language, and I think junior high wouldn't be the best time, in my opinion, to start it, especially across the board, because the children at that age have so many insecurities or inhibitions, and it becomes more of a, you know, something that they're embarrassed perhaps about to some extent. So I just think when they're young, they accept it very much. It becomes very much a part of their daily routine or their classroom experience. So it has worked well. In terms of French immersion and its availability across the province, I wonder if you could comment on just how well we've done in providing that option in the school boards across the province. I understood, just by way of background today, that Halifax has about 69% of the French immersion, and I mean HRSB has about 69% of the French immersion students.
Thank you. Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, the number of French immersion classes in the province continues to grow every year, and quite frank, in a good many communities there's a competition for seats. Halifax, I think, has about, you said 63% roughly, and that's probably right. Halifax, sort of by nature of the city, was probably really the first one in the province to get into the early immersion. They had both the critical mass and they had support that they needed to get in it, and some of the other jurisdictions to get geared up took a little bit longer. You know, I say the number of people in immersion classes is growing each year, and I expect will continue in the foreseeable future.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if the minister could tell me whether or not there's any initiative within the department that would really encourage the establishment of French immersion classrooms and programs across the province, whether there's a commitment on the part of the Department of Education to see that furthered.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Monsieur le Président. The department does provide a financial assentment through the federal provincial agreement if a French immersion class is begun, and that funding then continues throughout these school years.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Well, maybe I'll just go one step further with that and ask if you have any specialists within the Department of Education that would particularly be there as resource people for existing programs or for any school board that wanted to expand or set up programs.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Yes, we have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
I'm sure the minister knows that by and large, at least in Halifax regional municipality, the parents of French immersion students are very active and very engaged, and perhaps have somewhat of a reputation for engaging their elected representatives as well. So You can appreciate I come from an area that has a strong enrollment in French immersion, and in fact, we were pleased this year to have the high school French immersion students join Halifax West and become part of that school body, those French immersion students that come from mainland North. I realize that's created a ripple effect actually in the downtown area, which has created problems for the St. Pat's community, really because the school board, and it's outside of your hands, but the school board decision was to, if it was good for Halifax West to be in their family of schools, it might be good as well in mainland South and on the peninsula, so it's created a difficulty there. However, my question would be whether or not there is any way for the Department of Education to intervene in that issue, where the parents of the French immersion students in high school at St. Pat's want to remain together. I'm just, I'll say I'm a neophyte, so I want to know whether there's a way for you to in some way help that issue resolve itself, because again, just by way of numbers, I understand we have a critical core of French immersion students at Halifax West, but I would say not so at JL Ilsley, and that if they were reunited with the St. Pat's component that are from the peninsula, they would have a better, probably a better curriculum and options. So could you speak to that?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member, had I known she had been a City Council member before she came here, I didn't know that, because when she asked me about supplemental funding, I thought she was asking me a question rather than making a statement. And I probably might have phrased my response a little bit differently had I known your degree of your knowledge. Anyway, the answer, that is a decision of the school board. They made the decision to go with the three immersion programs in high school. All of those programs do provide sufficient credits for high school graduation. Would there be probably a broader program if they were in one location? The answer is yes. Are they getting good education in the three situations? I'm told yes, but that really is a matter for the school board.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Well, I'm glad we were able to address it at least here, but I thought perhaps that was the answer. I'd like to go briefly to ESL, the English as a Second Language demands. And in my area, again, we have a very large population of people from other countries. A lot of immigrants moved to the Fairview, Clayton Park area. And we feel that it has embellished our schools. It's most obvious when you go into the schools, the mixture of children from around the world. And Halifax West, being the largest school there, has children from about 50 different countries. And even the elementary schools, when you go in, they boast 38 countries or 35 languages spoken. So it has really been a marvelous addition to our schools, changed the complexity and the character of our schools as well. But the problem that I see is in the ESL area, or I'd like to explore it with you. I'm told there are 700 students in the Halifax Regional School Board that require ESL classes, special one-on-one ESL help. And there is no money following or attached to that service. So could you explain to me what the response is from the Department of Education? I mean, I know you're aware of that as a pressure or a challenge to the Halifax regional area, and really I would suggest most of the immigration is into the Halifax regional area. So could you respond on the departmental view of that?
Thank you. The Minister of Education.
Really, the area that the Honourable Member represents, I know that area reasonably well. And actually at one time had considered buying a home in that area. I can tell you that I recognize that the multicultural composition of that population of that area, and probably the greatest in any section of the town or any section of the province. I can also tell you that the ESL pressure is one that has been drawn to our attention by the Halifax School Board, and I believe that it is one of the things that Mr. Hogg will take into consideration when he is putting his new funding formula, making the recommendations, new funding formula. Whether or not would be included in the funding formula or not, I'm not making that commitment. I'm simply saying it's going to be one of the factors that would be looked at.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the minister specifically about that, whether there would be any federal dollars available to help us in our efforts to fund English as a second language, since it's very much tied into the immigration initiatives. So you talked about federal money being available for new French immersion classes and following those classes through as they advance in the system. I'm wondering if there is an argument to be made, or if that has been made, to suggest that this helps us to encourage and support immigrants.
Thank you, Member. Minister of Education.
Clearly, the federal department, the federal government recognizes the need for support for immigrants, but they have concentrated their efforts on adults, and thus we have the adult high school, the Nova Scotia Adult High School, and a variety of other programs that were funded under HR, Human Resources and Skills Development Canada now. And to my knowledge, the federal government has not participated in ESL programs in the public schools.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Halifax, Clayton Park.
Thank you very much. I think that, you know, that's pretty clear. They haven't offered money at this point. But I do think that immigration, that's where I want to go next, is to your portfolio of immigration, which surprisingly falls under the Education Department. It was a bit of a surprise to me to discover that that was where it rests. And on the good side, I understand you've gone from about a part-time FTE, or a portion of an FTE, to I believe it's 3 people dedicated in the immigration area. And I wonder if you could outline for us the role of the Department of Education as it relates to immigration, just in general, what the strategy is, or the efforts.
Thank you, Member. The Minister of Education.
I guess I'd like to qualify that. Though we are the lead department, the Department of Economic Development, the minister responsible for economic development also has a role to play in immigration. And what we are doing is trying to develop a plan to attract, integrate, and retain immigrants in our province. And I think what you may find as a result of this plan will be presented to government in June. And I would not be a bit surprised whether there was some reorganization of the responsibilities for immigration within government at that time. There are 2 things. There's sort of the economic immigration, and then there are the other parts of immigration as well. And our problem here in Nova Scotia is no different than many other parts of Canada. With our declining birth rate and shrinking population numbers, we are in a position that if we are going to grow our society and to have the numbers of people that we need to provide the skills and the skilled labor and all of those skills that we need to keep our economy functioning, immigration seems to be something we're going to have to get a whole lot more into. And what happens is, the honourable member knows, a good many immigrants, they come here and they wait here until they can get a ticket to Montreal, Toronto, or Vancouver. So we're sort of a stopping place rather than a destination point. So what we would like to do is to make Nova Scotia a destination point for more visitors from other country. And I'm talking about people who are going to stay and work and live here and contribute on a permanent basis to our society. And we're working with partners to examine how we can best do this, put in place initiatives for when immigrants arrive here, so how we can make them feel comfortable and fit into Nova Scotia. And there is a proposal by the Colchester Regional Development Agency, which rather than bringing one family into the community would see about 10, because like everybody else, you would tend to migrate to an area where there are people who share more of your values, and if you are speaking a different language, then you can do that type of thing, or perhaps religion and so on. So the proposal from Corda, which seems to have at least support in principle from the federal government, would bring a group of families to Colchester County, and so that there would be some sort of a critical mass so that they could they could interact with each other and perhaps feel more comfortable as ease into Nova Scotia society. And these initiatives are part of our skills agenda as well, to improve our competitiveness as we try to expand and to meet economic and social challenges that we have in the province.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Halifax, Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm very pleased to hear you mention the Truro initiative. I've heard something of it before, and I think it's a great way to go, and I think it would help very much to encourage and address the needs for immigration outside of our HRM area, because, let's face it, if HRM doesn't provide the support and the critical mass that people need when they come here to overcome some of the cultural change, certainly when they go to smaller towns and communities, it becomes even more accentuated. So by even considering allowing a group of people to come together and actually have a support system built in, I think is a very positive thing. And I would encourage you to pursue that in all haste, because I say haste because I think population is really our critical challenge for, right now and for the future. That I would suggest that we're almost in crisis mode in terms of population, because not only are we losing, here and there in regions, we're also losing overall in the province. Our population is down. We know what that means in terms of equalization payments, in terms of other transfer payments, and just our ability and our capacity to continue to thrive here in Nova Scotia, especially with an aging population. So I think we need a population strategy, and clearly immigration has to be part of that. And I have been able to, or been fortunate to be able to attend a number of just sessions and workshops about immigration, and I think it's an area that there's a lot that needs to be done in Nova Scotia. As I mentioned in my first comments, I'm really glad that there's been an expansion, at least of the resources we dedicate to that, and I think that perhaps you allude to it, after June we may see even more people dedicated to promoting immigration. It's been mentioned quite a few times in those immigration circles that Manitoba was at one time, perhaps less than 10 years ago, attracting the same number of immigrants that we were here in Nova Scotia, and it was around 3,500. They have now set a target and are getting very close to the 10,000 per year immigrant numbers, and we have in the meantime declined to something like 1,500 or 1,600 maybe. It's in that range. It's way down, and again, much below even our percentage of the Canadian population. When you take all the immigrants in Canada, we don't attract a proportional amount, and we don't retain them, as you mentioned. We have difficulty retaining people, and we really need to, and that's why I say I think it's an area that has to be looked at strongly. And I would also mention, just, well, I have the floor, that some other communities, for example, Quebec City, have, rather than trying to look at immigrants coming from overseas, are trying to get immigrants in Montreal to relocate to Quebec City. So they're saying, well, many immigrants flood to Montreal and Toronto, as you say, and they're realizing that they're on their doorstep and they can offer them a better quality of life or standard of living if they attract them just a short distance away to Quebec City. So maybe there's some other avenues that we can follow, as well as trying to bring people in directly from overseas. The one area, I know I'm running a little short of time, I'm very interested to know what is happening in that particular provincial program, the nominee program, where we have some provincial control. I mean, by and large, immigration is a federal matter, and here we've got an agreement in place that gives us an opportunity to do more in this immigration area. So I'm wondering if you could speak to it, tell me what our target was, tell me the numbers we've actually let through our doors. And I'm very interested to know how we administer this program. Who do we hire or pay to look after these applications, and how's it done? So that's a fairly big question to end with there.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Probably a larger question than I can provide the detailed answer to. The immigration program, the designated program, is looked after under the Office of Economic Development, and you may wish to put that question to the minister responsible. I can say that I understand that the number of people that we can support under this program is 200. There are a number of people who have applied, and those applications are being processed. To my knowledge, under that provincial nominee program, I don't know what number would have already been settled under that, but say my colleague, the minister responsible for the Office of Economic Development, could provide more detail. One of the things that I wanted to mention to you that I didn't before was that we have recently signed an agreement with the excuse me, the federal government, which will enable people who come to university in Nova Scotia, and as you know, we do attract in Nova Scotia a lot of people from offshore, and they will be able to work in Nova Scotia for 2 years after graduation. And now we have to be careful in that too. You know, there is a social responsibility when some of the people come to our schools from some of the developing countries. They are the best and the brightest, and you know, you have to consider the country from which they have come and the opportunity for leadership that is presented to them when they finish a higher education program here. The fact is that they're expected to go back home, and I do remember in my former portfolio as the health minister talking about recruiting health professionals from some offshore countries and really being taken up short by a person in international medicine who said, you know, you have to be very careful of the people that you recruit. Also, I believe Minister Sgro and I are meeting on Thursday. She is coming to Nova Scotia. She's the Federal Minister for Immigration. We had a meeting in January, and she and I will be talking indeed about ways that we can move forward in partnership to help bring immigrants to Nova Scotia.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Halifax-Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that it's the Office of Economic Development that I can take some more of these questions to, although I'd like to ask you a couple more about it just while we're on this subject, because I think that it's still your staff that would be helping to coordinate some of the efforts. In the example that you say a few people have applied, do you know if we hire somebody outside to actually measure or go through and see that the applications are complete and that they meet our requirements? Is that something that we have contracted out?
Thank you, member. Honourable Minister of Education.
My understanding, Mr. Chair, is that there is somebody inside the Office of Economic Development who has that function.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Halifax-Clayton Park.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to go just very quickly. I'm really interested in immigration, but we're going to leave it for a bit, and I only have a few minutes left. I'd like to ask a few questions about special education. And again, today, you can appreciate I've been at the Human Resources Committee this morning and had a chance to bring some of these educational issues to the forefront. And one of the things mentioned was that there are no tuition agreements at present in the Halifax Regional School Board, that they have none in place. And the school board chair indicated that she's only had a handful of applicants in the time that she has been there, which was somewhat of a surprise to me. Can you speak to the need for tuition agreements, especially in light of the fact that there's been some recognition of that in your in the bill that's come out recently on, or it's either in the Financial Measures Act or in a recent bill. But I feel the need is there in Halifax Regional Municipality that we have some more support for those students that cannot be successful in the classroom. And the answer I got today was pretty much that in Halifax Regional Municipality we can accommodate them in the classroom. So can you reply to that? It's a concern to a lot of constituents.
Thank you, member. The honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to speak for the Halifax Regional School Board, and the honourable member had a chance this morning to get first-hand responses from officials there. But I can tell you that I understand a couple of years ago the Halifax Regional School Board did have 7 tuition agreements. And to my knowledge, it was the only board in the province that did enter tuition agreements. We did have a number of people expressed interest in support for students who wanted to attend specialized schools. And thus, the commitment was made last summer to allow a very small number of students access to a tuition support program. And that program is currently under development. Now, I can understand the position of the Halifax School Board. You know, we give $48 million to funding that has to be used by boards to support students with special needs. Part of this per student funding would go to that. And then I think overall boards would say that they are contributing somewhere around $93 million to special education. And it's a very difficult area. I know boards do what they can. However, I think government recognizes that perhaps for some very small number of students that the type of specialized support that might be available in a school that specializes in dealing or helping students with various types of learning needs was something that might be desirable. Thus, the tuition support program that will be going in place next fall. And there will be an agreement by the school boards and the parents that students need this type of support. I guess one of the things that happens with these, and appreciate why it's awkward to put them into place, and maybe with a school board, is that there is a tendency sometimes that if young people are not doing as well as people would like to have them do in the public school, that a tuition support program or a tuition agreement would be the savior, and that's not the answer. You know, the school boards do provide yeoman service and do, in most cases, a very good job, certainly to the best of their abilities, to meet the needs of all students. But however, there may be that small number that could be take advantage of a tuition support program, and we're prepared to put one in, begin in September. We expect that maybe somewhere between 45 and 90 students might be eligible for this, and we are in the process of developing criteria with the board so that appropriate people would be selected.
Thank you, Minister. The member for Halifax, Clayton Park.
Well, I'm sure the minister has visited those schools there's a couple of them here in HRM, and I think there are a lot of parents that believe that those schools have really been a savior to them, that they have rescued their children from, a lot of times it's self-esteem problems because of their position in the classroom, where they've come from, whether they've been bullied or so on. So I think that it means an awful lot to those parents. I'd like to ask the minister if he's, or if the government together have looked at anything that might allow the tuitions in those special needs schools to be tax deductible, or even a portion of them tax deductible, because all of the parents, whether they're, none of them really essentially are getting any help at this point. They're all making sacrifices to pay large tuitions to have their children there, and it's not the kind of same sort of situation as you would say if a parent chooses a private school. It isn't that kind of decision. This is a decision they very often feel they have no alternative, otherwise their children will be lost. So I wonder if there has been any talk, or I'm certain that you must have been lobbied or asked about that in the past. So could you answer that, please?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Chairman. And that is a question that's been raised before, and clearly I can understand the feeling of the parents who were there, and when they believe that their son or their daughter is in a private school for a good reason. That really is a matter for the federal government, and again, my colleague, the Minister of Finance, would be the more appropriate official to address that with. I said one day is that I suspect one of the reasons that the federal government has difficulty making a decision here is the issue is, how do private schools really differ? The criteria for an acceptable institution, or then you have a home tutor and all of these things. I don't think it's simply, it's not just a simple matter of getting a tuition receipt. When you take a look at the whole issue of support services, if they really aren't prescribed medically, I don't think then in most cases that a tax receipt is issued.
Thank you, Minister, and the time allotted for thank you, member. I'll now recognize the member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to table an article from the Globe and Mail on Saturday. I don't know whether or not the minister had an opportunity to read the Globe and Mail on Saturday or not. But in the Globe and Mail on Saturday, there was a report about a study in the United States on how higher education pays off for women. And I'll just, a couple of things out of this article I'll read to the minister. It says, university administrators have been scratching their head over why female students are flooding into higher education. A U.S. researcher says she may have the answer, a finding Canadian academics say also holds water at institutions here. In the article, it tells us that the income of women with a bachelor's degree was 24% higher than for those women with only a high school diploma. And out of Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, an associate professor there who has done similar kind of research has found that women with a bachelor's degree earn 50 to 80% more a year than those with only a high school diploma. Now, this is not a surprise. There's an explanation for this. Women with high school diplomas generally work in service sector employment, which is often minimum wage or slightly above the minimum wage. Whereas access to higher education opens doors. It removes barriers for women. Our own advisory council on the status of women tabled their economic indicators report probably 2 years ago and pretty much demonstrated the same thing. Women who had high school educations made considerably less money than men with a high school education, and women with a university degree roughly made the same as what men with a high school education were making in the Advisory Council publication. Yet, knowing this, your government has made it impossible for women who are single parents with children, that child poverty category, from getting access to post-secondary education. They cannot be in receipt of social assistance and apply for student loan and go to university so that they can break out of the low-wage family poverty, child poverty cycle. Now, I want to ask you how much more research and evidence as a minister who has stood in his place many times as the former Minister of Health and now of Education and talk about evidence, how much more evidence do you need to tell you that erecting barriers for women having access to higher education will only result in increased inequality in our society and women and their children ending up in situations where they have incomes that certainly fall far behind?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
That's a very interesting question posed by the member from Halifax Needham, and I expect that she has or may be prepared to ask the same question of my colleague, the Minister of Community Services, and perhaps you have, and I'm sure you will. The current provision for the student loan program really don't take into account the criteria, things such as the number of children you have. And I know from a constituency point of view, I'm like other MLAs, I expect that we've all had people who fall into that category, single moms with children who come in and say that I want to go to school. And the amount that is available in student loans, I said, well, you know, I guess, and I was never clear, and I'm going to ask you for a little clarification on your question. The people that came to see me wanted to continue getting their community service allocation, but then they wanted a full student loan at the same time. And I thought about that, and I know that the student loans were intended to cover such things as you know, food and lodging, among other things, and it always seemed to me that they therefore, if this was allowed, unless some different system was worked out, they might be getting it twice. And maybe you can explain that for me, because I think you're going beyond something which
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd be happy to explain as much as I can about this to the minister. You know, before your government introduced the new Income Assistance Act, it was possible for a single mother on social assistance to apply to a university, apply to go take a bachelor's degree in arts or science, education, nursing, whatever. And if she had the academic qualifications to get in and was accepted into the program, she then could apply for a student aid like anybody else. And the student aid people would evaluate her on the basis of her income, her assets, her dependents, all of that kind of stuff. And they would award a student loan to her, which she would have to pay back just like anybody else. Now, community services would also assess her under provisions that would allow and encourage people on social assistance to continue with their education. And they would allow things like money for books and money for childcare, money for transportation, the tuition costs and all of that kind of stuff. And still apply their means test to ensure that you know, there wasn't all of this surplus money. And believe me, at the end of the day, when you factored in how much somebody was getting in a student loan and what was going out then for tuition, for books, for transportation, for childcare, that left nothing, no surplus. And it meant that that particular person could, in fact, go to university, could continue to receive income support, and could pay their tuition, could buy books, could have a computer, these kinds of things that would allow them to be successful. That changed. That policy changed. If you go to the Department of Community Services website and you go to the new Income Assistance Act and regulations, in 1998, I believe, with the introduction of that, or 1999, with the introduction of the bill and subsequently the implementation of the bill, it's very clear in the policy, in the Department of Community Services policy, it very clearly says that there will be no approval given for people who take higher education of more than 2 years in duration, a program that's more than 2 years in duration. There essentially are no university courses, for the most part, that are less than 3-year programs, baccalaureate programs. And also that student loans are now means tested in a way. So essentially it created these barriers. When I taught at the School of Social Work, I have to say that I think that the proudest times we had was during graduation, when you'd see the students that you'd worked with over a 3-4 year period, or maybe more, walk across that stage, and how you know, how really pleased that they were, how their families felt about their success, and what have you. We always felt very good about all of our students. But I have to tell you, the students who walked across that stage, for whom university education was a dream that that they had finally attained, and they knew that it opened doors to them that would not have been opened without having this opportunity and this possibility. It's really, I can hardly put words to that. And this has been taken away. This has been taken away from a whole group of people now in our province. And, I think it's a grave injustice. I think as Minister of Education, with a background in education, with a commitment to education, with the knowledge that you have of the importance of education as the great equalizer in terms of opening up opportunities for people, I would very much like to see you within your government, within your cabinet, with your colleagues within your government, really champion this particular issue. I've raised this issue with the former Minister of Education, and while she was very respectful in terms of hearing my concerns, and I know the Deputy Minister has heard me raise these here before, and I've written letters on behalf of individuals, and I've raised this as a policy issue, and what have you, I don't think that unless you really have had the contact with people in the situation for whom a baccalaureate degree is such an achievement, that it opens doors, that it allows them a possibility of getting beyond the low-income family incomes that we see. If, there are some of us that understand this based on our life experience as teachers, and we need a champion for this issue. And I will take this up with the Minister of Community Services, but not to put too fine a point on it. I'm not wildly enthusiastic about where he's going to take it. I think this requires an educator. This requires an educator with an educator's perspective, with an educator's commitment, and a strong advocate with some influence inside your government to do the right thing here and right a wrong that I think is quite an injustice. That's what I'm asking for.
Thank you, Member. There's far too much noise in the chamber. Didn't want to interrupt the Honourable Member while she was speaking, but perhaps the members could take their conversations outside. I'll recognize the Honourable Minister of Education.
The Honourable Member makes a very compelling case for the issue which she raises, and I can tell you it's something with which I have a sympathy. One of the agencies which I have found did help in cases that I dealt with in my constituency was the federal government through the Employment Office, and I can speak for the folks in my area anyway. They seem to be to lean over backwards to lend the support that could be legitimately given. So I do know that there were a number of people in our area that were either going to the community college or going to the agricultural college where we were able to find a solution to their difficulty. But I can say as well, there were also cases where we were not able to find a solution that worked for everybody. Anyway, I will certainly take your advice under advisement and give it thought.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much. There are a couple of other things that I'd like to talk about at the level of post-secondary education. One is around the possibility of a master's degree program being instituted at the School of Occupational Therapy in the Faculty of Health Professions over at Dalhousie. I know that today we have a baccalaureate program in occupational therapy over there, but the professional credentials are changing constantly. And this is a profession that requires, in order to be credentialed, really requires an opportunity for people in that profession to have access to a master's level of education and supervision from people who are at that level, at the baccalaureate level, having people who have the ability to develop some expertise and what have you. So I know that the Faculty of Health Professions and the School of Occupational Therapy are very much interested in pursuing an expansion of their program so that they can offer a master's program in occupational therapy. And I'm wondering if your department is supportive of this, and if so, at what stage is this at, and when we can look forward to seeing some concrete action or development here.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, I don't think conceptually our department would have a problem with the Master of Occupational Therapy. However, I do have real reservations about what might be the end result. And I'm told that there are a certain group of occupational therapists, you may wish to correct me, who would like to have the master's degree as the minimum entry to the field. And that's where the reservation comes from. And to be quite frank, we've seen that. You know, we went through this in teacher education yesterday, you understand, and I would, you know, we went through it in nursing and all of these things where it's, you know, credential creep, and you pick a profession. We've done it in just about them all, medicine, and you know, you pick one, and that's unfortunately, I think when people express reticence about the Master of Occupational Therapy, it's not in the validity or the desirability of offering a master's degree. It's a wish by a number of people in that profession to have the master's degree as the minimum entry point for practice. Now, I do know that as well that is going to be discussed on an Atlantic-wide basis at a meeting of the Deputies of Health and Education sometime in the not-too-distant future. But I say, you know, from my point of view, I think at the point of the department, the master's is something that the university and the MPHEC, whoever makes the decisions on what programs will be offered in what place, but it's the fear is that there is a group of people out there who would want the minimum entry to that field to be a master's degree, and we all know what then comes from that.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the Minister. I think in the profession of social work, we went the other way. We only had a master's in, we only had a master's program when I entered the profession, and now certainly we have the benefit of the bachelor's program, and I have to say that there are many days when out of my constituency office we have my constituency assistant will tell me about, you know, a piece of casework he's working on, and he's been dealing with a particular person, and I'll say, oh, that's, you know, one of my students. Oh, he was one of my students, or she was one of my students, and the BSW program has been a great addition to social work for sure. Minister, as we speak, there are a group of, there's a labor dispute over at Dalhousie. The teaching assistants and some of the instructors are on strike over there. It's an issue that concerns me a great deal, although I don't know very many of these people. But if I was there teaching, I probably would know some of the young men. They tend to be young men and young women who are on the picket line. You know, I have, in the short time that I've taught at Dalhousie, I've seen an increasing number of part-time and sessional people teaching in the university setting. I've seen an increasing burden being placed on the TAs and the various instructors to provide a lot of support to a shrinking number of faculty members. I see students coming into the programs who are taking courses as full-time students and who are also in the labor market as full-time workers. I think our universities, I mean, there are many wonderful things about our province that are a resource and that give us potentially a competitive edge, as they like to say in the current market-driven lexicon. I think our universities, in fact, are one of those things that give us a competitive edge. We all know we do very well in the Maclean survey. Our universities are rated quite well. But I question how much longer that will be the case. The allocation this year of an additional $1 million to all of those post-secondary institutions we have in this province that we cherish for good reason is just simply inadequate. And what we will see is the ongoing erosion of the conditions of work, the standards that people want to have maintained in our educational facilities. And I think it's unacceptable that we end up in situations where we exploit these people in our universities. And I don't know what it's going to take to get a stronger commitment from your government to this sector. I know that the university presidents have been around. They've met with all of the different caucuses. I know that they must have been just incredibly disappointed to learn where they fit into this year's budget, and the impact of that is on the staff, it's on wages, it's on working conditions, it's on class sizes, it's on higher tuitions, it's on more students having to work full-time and try to study full-time. And so I want to know how much longer are we going to have the reputation that we have as being a great province with great educational institutions if we continue to treat this important resource in this way. I mean, I don't think we can maintain our reputation under these conditions much longer.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank the Honourable Member for, again, bringing to the floor of this House the quality of the universities system that we have in this province, and clearly it's finest in Canada overall. That is not to say it can be improved. I suppose when we look at the size of the amount of money that the provincial government gives to the university sector, when I say that we gave 2.76 as opposed to 1, although $1 million is $1 million, $1 million, and percentage-wise, it's not great. And clearly, Mr. Chair, I wish we could do better. I do, though, want to draw to the attention of the honourable member that, in addition to the operating money, we did top up the University Research Fund, and then, of course, the CFI through the Office of Economic Development, and of course the Health Research Foundation and the Gaming Foundation. These are government monies which are normally accessed by university people. So there is a significant amount more going in than the operating money if you take a look at all elements of it. We are working with a memorandum of, to produce a memorandum of understanding with the universities. It involves people from my department, people from the Premier's office, as well as representatives from the university sector, to try and come to an agreement that would have certain conditions from I won't use the word concession, but certain agreements between the department or the government and the universities, which we think would be to the benefit of us all in exchange for a 3-year funding pattern. And we think that if you know how much money you're going to get over a 3-year period, it helps you considerably in your planning. We hope that it would be a factor in stabilizing tuition rises. To say we went to that with the health boards, and I think the predictability has helped them considerably in their planning. Not that there is enough money available to do everything they want to, but I can tell you that this government very much appreciates the not only the educational impact of our universities, but the economic impact of our universities. It's the amount of money that comes into our province because of the higher education sector is really a lot, and we will do everything in our power to not only protect what the universities do and do well, but to enable to help them enhance their offerings.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
I see that the time is getting close to the moment of interruption, so I have a few very quick questions. Every year I look at the line item for the Black Educators Association in the supplementary detail book, and every year the amount of money is identical, $657,000. I'm wondering, do the people who work for the Black Educators Association not warrant pay increases tied to the cost of living like others? Do they not have the same exposure to inflation and the increases in the cost of their rental premises and their insurance and their supplies and all of those things like others? Like, why is this line item frozen? Because that essentially is how it appears to me. And my knowledge of the Black Educators Association and what they're being asked to do now, they have field offices around the province, as the minister probably knows. Their head office is located on Gottingen Street in my constituency, but they provide services all over the province. But constantly there are many boards that call them in to troubleshoot when there are problems that boards experience around issues of race and racial discrimination, race relations, and what have you. I think that this is an organization that merits at least cost of living increases on a regular basis, and I don't understand why it's a line item that's frozen. Perhaps you can help me by explaining that.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Chairman, I can't go back into the history of that grant, but I do know that one of the things that this government has done, and I know the role of the person in my community, is the provision of the African Nova Scotia School Board member, and I know that the person who is on the board in our community, along with the race relations coordinator in Chignecto Central Regional School Board, some of these difficulties that you're suggesting that the Black Educators Association, the office, go out and do, then they are being picked up, and that, of course, has been additional money. I want to just say that the increase this year is roughly about 16.03%. I guess that's probably more precisely than roughly, but for example, the African Canadian Studies Division, the increase there has been $443,000. Whereas the Education Center and the Student Services and Race Relations, they've remained virtually constant. Now, I'm informed by staff that in addition to the money that appears in the estimates book, I'm going to have to go back to that statement. But I think, like everything else, people become more efficient, and they do their jobs more efficiently. And then there are, say, some additional resources out there in the community that were not available. And like everything else, we would like to put more money into that particular section of the Department of Education, and we will increase funding as we can.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thanks very much. And I want to thank the minister. I am aware that there is an increase in the African Canadian Services Division, and I'm happy to see that, and I'm happy to see, any additional money that is allocated for the implementation of the Black Learners Report. But the Black Educators Association are, they do tutoring with kids. They're very close to the ground in terms of providing those additional supports that sometimes children and young people need. And I know many young people actually who have been tutors with the Black Educators Association around our province. And I know quite a bit about some of the work that they do in my constituency and elsewhere. And the minister's explanation that there are efficiencies is just bunk, to be honest with you. That's not a good explanation for why they're frozen. This isn't about becoming more efficient in the face of, regular costs of living increases that most organizations have and deserve. And so I think what happens is it's very discouraging for people who work in these fields. They do it because they do it out of love and out of commitment for the work they do. But that only goes so far. These folks have student loans to pay off, and they have families to feed, and they have a right to have their work valued and reflected in the allocation of resources from government to them. So at that, I think I should ask